with you talking about one of my favorite topics, which is personal branding. And so before we get started, just a couple of things that we're going to be working on today. We'll introduce one another. I'll start, and then we'll be working on our introductions. And then we're going to zero in and talk a bit about personal branding, define what it is and why it's so important. And all of us has a personal brand, but how do I build one? So we're gonna take the first few steps at building a personal brand or refining the one that you've already got. And then we'll wrap up with a promise that we're going to make to ourselves. So by way of introduction, as Molly said, I'm Professor Pamela Campagna. I started off my career in academia, like many of you folks, working on an MBA in international business in Washington, D.C. And following my MBA completion, I moved into working in technology companies. So I spent about a dozen years or so working in the technology field, and then I moved into consulting. And so for me, in terms of personal branding, I really did shift my personal brand from graduate school into working for organizations, working for tech companies, and then again, working in the consulting arena. When I started my business in 1997, so it'll be 25 years this year, at that same time, I also started to teach at universities. So again, when you think about personal branding, you think about teaching at a university, which is one way of reinforcing your brand. And it's very different than teaching or working in a consulting setting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about personal branding using myself as an example. And then we're also going to talk about your examples as well. And so just by way of background, an overall sense of my personal brand. And then if I zero in on the work that I do, excuse me, at Hult, I'm a professor of practice at Hult. I've been there for 8 years now. And I'm about to lose my voice, so I'm sorry. And I teach across a number of programs, and I teach several different courses, primarily in marketing, leadership, management, strategy, and my home campus is Boston, so I'll always encourage folks to visit the Boston campus or make it their home campus. And you'll also notice that most of our faculty work very closely with our students, not only in the classroom, but also outside. So we do a lot of work, for example, advising student clubs. Students can initiate their own club every year. The Women in Business Club and the Consulting Club, those are ones that I traditionally work closely with. We also support our students outside of Hult as well. Sometimes, for example, they compete in external programs like the IXL Innovation Olympics. And so that's a very important factor of the work that we do. And then I guess a third element of the work that I do as a professor at Hult is my research. I have research in a couple of areas of interest. One is I work quite a bit with women in leadership. So researching, mentoring, researching different theories of leadership, going into the field and doing ethnographic research. I've published a couple of business cases along those lines. Most recently, I've been working with a gender lens fund in the country of Jordan. They kicked off a business accelerator. So I've combined some of the work I'm doing on the consulting side together with the research that I'm doing at the university. And so you see, in terms of how I brand or position myself, it's really connecting the different elements, the different areas of the work that I do. Now, I mentioned the Hult Boston campus. These are photos of classrooms. I prefer to teach in the flexible classroom. You see one of them with the red carpeting. And you can see in the bottom right, that's a class that I finished about 2 weeks ago. And we have quite a diverse student population. On the Boston campus this year, I think there are 130 different nationalities that are represented. So really an opportunity to meet a lot of people from different backgrounds, and to also look at how you can brand yourself across cultures. And when I say across cultures, it could be an organizational culture, it could be a geographic culture, it could be moving from one cultural team at Hult to working on another cultural team at Hult. So each of these are different opportunities for you to work on your personal brand and to try things out. I love this photo because this is when technology just doesn't work. So Zoom decided that it was going to freeze the projection and Zoom when we were working in a hybrid environment. One of the things that we're really proud of was that we had an agile approach to how we were going to come back into the classroom after the pandemic. And now we are up and running and never really skipped a beat. So that's a bit about my background, my education, my consulting connected to my academic work. I did mention that I started my own company, and it's called Blue Sage Consulting. The company itself is in the process now of being rebranded. Here's an image of my homepage. And over the years, I have worked with quite a few companies from around the world, primarily business to business, and mostly in the tech sector. And so when I talk about my personal brand, I always like to connect it to the different audiences that I work with. And in the case of my consulting work, it's companies. So you'll notice some of the names that you recognize, Microsoft, Cisco, some of the banks. I've done quite a bit of work in financial services, in banking as well. So this gives you an idea of the official introduction to Pamela, Professor Campagna. But when we're talking about ourselves and we're considering how we want the world to see us, we also want to consider other elements, such as what are our passions, what are our interests, beyond what I've already discussed. And so for me, folks that get to know me know that I am an avid gardener. So these are some of my flowers. I also like to garden vegetables. So this is basil on the left. And that year we had quite a bit of pesto. So pasta with pesto and cooking with it. Here's a sample of some of my bounty from last summer. And you'll notice that there are some cucumbers and zucchini. With the zucchini, of course, because I love to cook and bake. Again, another one of my passions. This is a sample of some zucchini bread. For any of you that haven't eaten lunch or dinner yet, I'm sorry if I'm making you hungry here. And then here are pickles. So I like to learn new things. I had never made pickles, and so I tried it. And so many of my students call me Professor Pickles. And so you notice as I'm going through here, I'm really sharing with you a story of my background, my interests. And that's part of my personal brand. Another passion, most recently, is my 7-month-old grandson. And this is Logan. And so in terms of things that interest me or people that interest me, he certainly is at the top of the list these days. So I'm Pamela Campagna, welcome, and I'm really glad to meet everybody. But we really haven't met yet, so I'll give you the opportunity now, if you will, to step into the spotlight. So I'd like you to take 1 or 2 minutes, and I'd like you to think about how you might introduce yourself to the rest of the people here in the webinar. So who are you? What is your passion? And think about value. What value could you offer to a client or to a classmate? So give it a few minutes, gather your thoughts, and when you're ready, if you want to put your responses in the chat, feel free to jump in. And don't be shy. So who are you? What is your passion? And what value can you offer to a client or to a classmate? So let's see, I see Khalid, Vinu, Andy, Isabel, Christian, Luis, Kevin, Barbara, Umesh, Bianca, Javier, Dara, Jonah, Olivia. Okay, I'm a master's student and a fresh sales manager. That's great. So Khalid, okay, I was just gonna ask you, what is your passion? Your passion is to be useful. And now think about what value can you offer to a client or a classmate? Christian, I'm the jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes best than the master one. That sounds like a rhyme. Now, Christian, when you think about being the jack of all trades, but the master of none, how can you translate that perhaps into value? Does this mean that perhaps you are agile and you can handle a lot of different things at the same time? Maybe you're the value you can bring is you are a master multitasker. Consider what value could you offer? How can you turn that into a value statement? And let's see, you can offer a client a good product. To a classmate, it would be your knowledge and experience. Okay, nice. Others? Let's see, Isabel from Brazil. Okay, I'm passionate about health and I can offer training and education around healthy lifestyle. All right, so you have an idea here of how you might get started with your introduction. Think about who are you? How do you want to describe yourself? What is your passion? And then what value might you be able to offer to a client or a classmate? Now, when we talk about personal branding, it's really not a new idea. Some of you may have heard about it before. As a matter of fact, in 1997, the year that I started my business, there was a magazine called Fast Company. And Fast Company, which I'm holding up here, they had an article on the cover by Tom Peters. And the article was entitled, "The Brand Called You. You can't move up if you don't stand out." So in this article in 1997, Tom Peters really talked about the whole notion of personal branding. He introduced it to the world. He talked about it in comparison to other types of marketing or branding, and really kicked off a focus on connecting marketing and branding an individual as a way of improving productivity or standing out. So he defined branding, personal branding, as a process. So today we're going to talk about this process. It's not something that just happens once and you never need to work on it again, but it is a process where you can establish a unique personal identity. So this is about determining how do you differentiate yourself from other people, and how do you communicate that and communicate it actively. So when we talk about personal branding, it's not about just saying, this is the work that I do, it's who I am, here's my passion, here's my value. It's about actively reinforcing that, communicating that, doing it online and offline. So if it's online, it could be your LinkedIn profile, it could be on Instagram. If it's offline, it's about engaging with people in conversation. It's about networking. It's about how do you interact face to face when you're in a business or a school setting. So actively communicating and considering who is the target market, who's the audience that I'm speaking to. So the personal brand that I have when I am interviewing for a job or out in the job market and I'm networking there, the personal brand elements are maybe a little bit different than when I'm working in a team at Hult and I'm just getting to know people. So it can be very situational, very contextual. And it's about evaluating the impact on my image and reputation. So think about when somebody hears your name, what thought comes into mind? What image do they have of you? And finally, this is to fulfill your personal and professional objectives, not only in the short term, but also in the long term. So there are a couple of different elements of personal branding. This is a question that I often get, which is, how do I prevent myself from seeming like I'm bragging or boasting? And my response is that the most important element of branding, personal branding, is to be authentic, is to really be true to yourself, as opposed to trying to represent someone that is not you. So it should resonate with you. Your personal brand should emphasize your character. That should be clear. Your capabilities. So these could be your skills. These could be your talents. It should be aspirational as well. It should be looking into the future. And then we want to consciously and continually develop and refresh and manage our personal brand. Now, when I say manage your personal brand, I don't mean that that we want to manipulate, but we want to manage. We want to be consistent in the messages that we're putting out to communicate our personal brand. And these messages should support our brand. So if we consider branding and look at branding a product or a service, here's a nice perspective, a different way of looking at it. So this is a product life cycle. And in a product life cycle, we have different stages. So let's use an example. Let's say the Apple iPhone. When I was working in software companies in the 1980s, I was traveling a lot and working with Apple. And at the time, they were doing a lot of R&D, a lot of research and development in new technologies. And the Apple iPhone wasn't out yet, but it was somewhere in the development stage, in the early stages. The technology was being developed. So that was stage one. And then, of course, the iPhone was introduced to market. The market started to grow. That's the third phase. The first iterations of the iPhone reached maturity. They were replaced by different versions, new technology, different footprints, et cetera, et cetera. And then market saturation, market decline. So the older versions of the iPhone then were sunset. They were taken out of the marketplace to replace by new versions and new technologies. So that's a basic product life cycle. And so think about yourself in terms of your life cycle, your career. So when you first launch, when you graduate university, undergraduate or postgraduate, your personal brand is being established at one transition point, let's say, in your career. So that's kind of like your introduction stage, which is different than maybe years from now, when you've been in business, been working maybe for a decade or so, excuse me, a decade or two, and then you're in the middle of the career. And this could be a point where you may want to switch jobs, switch companies, maybe start your own company. So this is the middle of your career, and this is also an opportunity where you might want to transition and you may want to modify your personal brand. And then finally, the later stage of your career. So this could very much outline the product life cycle stages. So think about, where are you in terms of your personal brand? Now, I put together this chart so we could kind of continue on the analogy of product and services branding and translate that over to personal branding. So think about if you are the product. So on the left-hand column, I'm using my company and the services that I offer in Blue Sage as an example. So we usually have a logo or a design for a company or for a product. In this case, I told you I'm rebranding my business. So on the left is the old logo, on the right is the new logo. And so if you wanted to brand yourself with some sort of a design, what image do you want to convey? And now in this case, I use my professional business photo as the image that I would like to convey. But it could just as well have been an illustration. It could have been something else. So what is the moniker, the design, the logo that you want to convey? And then if we go to the next row below that, companies typically have a tagline. So my tagline is building better businesses. So think about, what is your tagline? What is the brand statement that fits you? How would you define yourself? And for me, I use the brand statement, which is, I'm a consultant and a professor who connects learning from the field into the classroom and back again. So if you looked at my CV, if you looked on my LinkedIn profile, you will find those words in there. So that is my tagline. And then again, on the left-hand column, if we're looking at branding a product or a service, we'll always talk about the features. So what does it do? The functions, how does it do it? And then the benefits. Who cares? What is the value? So features, functions, and benefits. So in terms of personal branding, the features could be, what can you offer? And the functions are, how do I offer it? How do I do this? And then the benefits, what is the single biggest benefit that I can offer to a colleague, to a classmate, to an employer? So think about features, functions, and benefits. Think about your tagline and think about your design. So you are the product. How do you want to position yourself and brand yourself in the market? So the first step is we are going to see how we are currently branded. So this is a two-step exercise that we're going to do here. So the first thing we're going to do is, I would like you to search your name. So go on Google, search your name, and you may want to search pictures, see what comes up. So select images and see what you find there. So what is the current personal brand that you have in the marketplace? And then I want you to tell us what you see. So give us an example of your personal brand, just a couple of words to describe it. And I'd like you to put that example in Menti. So go to menti.com. This is a polling software that we use. This is the code. So type in that code. And Molly, I don't know, did you put it in the chat as well?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. So Google your name, search for yourself or any pictures, anything written about you. What is the personal brand that's out there for you today? And then enter what you see, describe what you see by going to Menti. And I'm going to pop over to Menti so I can share it with you. So what are you seeing? What is an example of your personal brand? I think in the last session, we had someone who had run for some sort of a public office. So their election photos were there. Their high school information was there. See, I have pictures, few pictures of me, all social, not the personal brand I want. Thank you for being honest there. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, a photo from your university emerged. Now, that's interesting. So here's an opportunity. If I search on your name and I can't find anything, that's a great opportunity for you to start to now establish your personal brand. Nothing much, a coaching woman around the world. Wonderful. So consider if you do have a personal brand that exists right now online, what is it? How do you want to change it, if at all? And if you don't have one, what might you do in order to establish one? Okay, nothing much. Famous actresses, that's going to be tough to compete with. Okay, wonderful. So I would consider or encourage you to keep working on this exercise, especially when you think about job interviews. Oftentimes the first place that companies will go to find out a little more about you is to do just what I did. My LinkedIn photo, photos with friends at work, photos related to my job. That's great. That's great. And you know, what are the messages? Do you have a brand statement that's out there that people can see? I can see my LinkedIn. Great, wonderful. All right, let's go back to PowerPoint. And by the way, I would encourage you to do this every so often as you're working on your personal brand, just to see what's changed. So when we think about our personal brand, I've talked about a couple of different things. I've talked about the skills. So what are the skills and talents that we might want to communicate as part of our brand? What is the personality that we want to have out there? Is it fun and friendly? Is it a serious personality? Is it a creative one? How would you describe the personality that goes into your personal brand? What are the core values that are important to you? Can you communicate that with words, with images, with actions? And then the passion, we talked about passion before. How does that factor into your personal brand? And you know, I just pulled a screen grab of a recent post. So if you were to look at my LinkedIn profile, you notice in the background, the image is a little fuzzy, but it's images of flowers, right? So I already told you that I have a passion for gardening. So I could have used images of buildings or people standing behind a desk, but I chose, very thoughtfully, I chose something that represented my interest in gardening. And to me, that feels more approachable. So these may be subtle things that you can change, but try some of them and see what works for you. So I mentioned a personal brand statement, which is kind of like our tagline. And the tagline can be built by going back to the first thing we did when we started here, which is talking about who we are and what our passion is, and talking about value that we can offer. And when we put those together, that is what we can work with in order to define something that adds up to a unique you. So what makes you unique? And my brand statement, I mentioned, is a consultant and a professor who connects learning from the field into the classroom and back again. And so that's one that I use quite frequently. So I'd like to ask you to give some thought to your personal brand statement. And when you're ready, just put it into the chat if you don't mind. So what is your personal brand statement? Now, for those of you that started earlier, Olu, I'm a turnaround specialist primarily focused on organizational improvement, behavior, and performance. I'm passionate about success, family, and sports. I offer coaching to classmates and help improve business performance. So you've got the three elements there. How can you weave those together into one personal brand statement? Khalid, I'm a young researcher who knows what he writes and talks about quite well. Okay. And what is your passion? And how is that valuable to someone? Let's see, Jonah. I study journalism at the University of Pristina. My passion is photography. Great. And I can offer beautiful pictures with a good artistic point of view. So now you can see that now we're beginning to build a bit on our introduction. In addition to saying, this is who I am, this is my job title. Now we can talk a bit about passion. What makes us unique? What makes us different? Where can we add value? I'm a civil engineer. My passion is about project management, how to change our lifestyle. Okay. All right, excellent. So our personal brand statement really is the first step in working on our personal branding. And what I'd like to ask you to do is to think about what is one promise that you can make to yourself to get started on your personal branding. What is one action step that you can take today? So name one promise I can make to myself that will help me to develop my personal brand. And put that in the chat, please. What is one promise that you can make to yourself? Improve and improvise. Thank you, Bisma. And again, as I said, this is a process and it has many steps to it. And it's something that should be included in what we do every day. Someone asked me in another session, how many hours a day or week should we allocate to building our personal brand? And my response was, it's not something you do in addition to your day-to-day. It should become part of what you do day-to-day. Follow and believe in my dreams. So Kevin, how will that then be incorporated into your personal brand? Okay, I will work on my personal brand statement. Great. I will update my LinkedIn profile. Wonderful. I will think about my tagline. I will reinforce my skill set. That's great. And again, we've got passion, we've got skills, character. So all of these elements can be included in your personal brand. I'll focus on my end goal. Wonderful. I will focus on the learnings from today. Thank you, Javier. Excellent. Excellent. Good work. So again, consider the promises that you can make to yourself for your personal and professional growth. And one of the important aspects is when you consider your personal brand, how are you positioned relative to other brands that are in the market today? What do you want to be known for? And what is it that you can do to help to plan that and to bring it to life? And so with that, I would like to thank everybody. I know this was quick, unfortunately, but I welcome anybody who wants to reach out on LinkedIn while you're there working on your personal brand and your profiles. And with that, we will turn it over to some questions. So Molly, back to you.